Chapter 1 I am a reasonable person. The early morning at Duan Wangfu was not different from any other day. In the kitchen, the servants moved to and fro without any hint of hurry. Ma Pozi, after delivering the required pastries to the Niiwan, came back to the kitchen with a group of Yawan, but her face wasn't looking very well. "Hey, old sister, what's wrong? Why does your face looks terrible?" Another Pozi, wearing a dark buttoned jiao, handed a cup of tea over to the other woman and exclaimed in shock, "Didn't you just go to the Zheng Yuan to deliver the cheese? How come? Don't even mention it. Wang Fei just woke up this morning. Rough labor servants like us couldn't even enter the yard. We only saw one of Wang Fei's attendants, Yin Lu Gunyang." When she spoke to that point, Ma Poza took a long swallow of tea, looked around at the surroundings and lowered her voice to "Whipser, I saw that the expressions of the people of Zheng Yuan weren't right, so I hurried back." Hearing this, the Poza who wore the lined jacket sighed. With an attitude composed, half being a spectator and half pitying, she said, "They hadn't even finished taking down the red canopies hanging in the fu yet. Wang Fei had just married into the fu for less than 2 months. After the wedding night, Wang Ye hadn't stepped a foot into the Zheng Yuan. In the last few days of sickness, Wang Ye had only sat for a period before leaving. No wonder the people of Zheng Yuan weren't looking very well. She once had the luck to see Wang Fei. She had been dignified and her appearance had also been beautiful. She didn't know which of those aspects Wang Ye didn't like. "Don't say nonsense, I just saw one of Feng Ce Fei's Yawan come over." Both of them knew the words that Ma Poza didn't say. They stopped talking and went back to their duties. In the Zheng Yuan, a host of Yawan carefully waited upon the Wang Fei in her morning ablutions. A piece of first-rate silk brushed over fingertips that were as thin as green onions before being set to the side. There wasn't a hint of anger on the face of Qing Ju, unlike the past few days, as her black silk flowing freely. She lazily took off her wrist a green jade bracelet before casually throwing it into a carved mahogany box. "This color is too old-fashioned." Upon hearing this, Jin Zhan paused slightly before waving her hand at the female attendants behind her. Several other boxes were brought before Qing Ju. Inside, there were pairs of different bracelets. Gold-wrought, pearl-encrusted, jade, of all colors, and none of them were ordinary. Her gaze swept across the rows of bracelets. In the end, her final choice was an exquisitely carved blood-red jade bracelet that, when contrasted against the pale wrist, was unspeakably beautiful. Seeing the situation, Jin Zhan's expression slightly changed. In the past, Wang Fei had resented the phoenix blood jade bangle as being too garish and never worn it. Today, she had picked this jade at first glance. Thinking about the days since marrying into the Wang Fu, she felt bitterness in her heart. Before marriage, Wang Fei's personality had been warm and gentle. This would have been a virtue, but in a marriage into the imperial family, that personality was a handicap. Noticing Jin Zhan's expression, Qing Ju smiled faintly. She stood and spread her arms to let the maids dress her in her hand-picked wide-sleeved silk dress. It was made from the highest quality of white brocade embroidered with shoe-style red plum blossoms. When the cloth swayed, it was as though there were real plum blossoms swaying in the wind. At the waist, there were a spice bag embroidered with 2 blossoming lotus flowers on a single stem and a jade-beaded laozi. The long soft hair was coiled up into a face yenji. A vibrant red peach blossom was drawn on the brow. Eyebrows like willow leaves. Lips as red as cherries. Just a glimpse was enough to be unspeakably bewitching. Pushing a Luan bird and cloud bio into her hair by herself, Qing Ju slowly stood and enigmatically smiled as she looked out the winder. This time should be the time to pay respects. A few steps away from Jin Zhan was Mu Jinhu. Upon hearing this, forced a smile and said, "Wang Fei, since you were ill the last few days, Wang Ye told the Haoiwan so the Kishi wouldn't disturb your rest." "Oh," gently caressing the red-stranded jade earrings on her earlobes, Qing Ju leisurely sat down and adjusted into a somewhat comfier position. She accepted the warm water that Yin Lu handed over to rinse her throat. Lifting the lid back on the cup before wiping the corner of her mouth, she said, "Since that is the case, send somebody to each yard to deliver the news that Ben Wang Fei has just recovered and has terribly missed all the Ce Fei and the Shiki." The 4 de Yawan, upon hearing this, exchanged glances between themselves. Even if they didn't know the reason why Wang Fei's personality upon waking had changed so much, they still obeyed and left. Coming out of the main building, a slightly worried Jin Zhan said, "Wang Fei doesn't seem normal today since waking up, I don't know why. In this Wang Fu, everybody shows Wang Fei respect on the surface, but in their private time, they all go currying favor with that Ce Fei in Xi Yuan. Wang Fei has been married for 2 months. Other than the first 3 days where Wang Ye stayed in Zheng Yuan, he's spent all his time with other concubines. It's humiliating for our Wang Fei." Yin Lu said with creased brows and a quiet voice, that Feng Ce Fei has such an attitude. She really thinks that she's worth something. She's just a Qi. Yu Zan, hearing what Yin Lu was saying, looked around surreptitiously and after not finding anyone in the surroundings, came closer and said, "Don't say too much. Even if Wang Ye favors Feng Ce Fei, he still gives Wang Fei the respect she's accorded. Don't make trouble for Wang Fei. This is called respect," Yin Lu snorted. Thinking about her mistress' warm and soft personality, she sighed in helplessness. "Whatever, Jin Zhan and I will go over to Feng and Zhang Ce Fei. The second-rank Yawans can go to the other Shiki." Mu Jin, who hadn't spoken, nodded, "That's very good. Bai Luo and Puer are enough to invite Luo Shi and Han Shi." Among the Yawan in Wang Fei's entourage, the first ranked were named using flowers, the second using tea, the third and the heavy labor Yawan had no guidelines. Mu Jin and the other 3 had followed Wang Fei from Chang to Gong Fu, so they naturally followed Wang Fei. But the Wang Fu was much more complicated. Before marriage, Wang Fei had been neglected by her stepmother and hadn't learned how to manage a household. Consequently, it didn't even take 2 months after entering this place that she had gotten ill. Mu Jin had always been worried for Wang Fei, but seeing that Wang Fei today had the desire to establish herself in the Wang Fu, she took a sigh of relief. She didn't worry that Wang Fei would fight, she would only worry if Wang Fei still had the personality of mud. Seeing that all the Yawan had retreated out, Qing Ju stood and walked in front of a very large copper mirror. The craftsmanship was excellent. Even if it wasn't as clear as the silvered glass mirrors from before, it was still enough to distinguish a person's appearance. The girl in the mirror was only about 16 or 17. Her appearance was very beautiful. If she had lived in the era she did before, she would have been just a beautiful and proud high school student. Combing through the memories in her head, Qing Ju sighed. Her father didn't care, her stepmother wasn't compassionate, her husband didn't have love, and there was a crowd of troublesome Qi. The original had had a soft personality. In this complicated Wang Fu, she had mysteriously gotten seriously ill and mysteriously became occupied by her, this woman who didn't know what warmth was. It could be said that she had gotten no justice even in her death. "Wang Fei, the kitchen has delivered breakfast." From the outside came a slightly thin male voice. It was probably one of the Tajian that had been assigned according to the imperial protocols. In Qing Ju's memory, the original were not very close to these Tajian, but was full of courtesy as they were appointed before Wang Ye had been titled and during the time he had been in charge of the Department of Household Affairs, Dian Zongshen. "Start service." Playing with the strands dangling from the gold biao, Qing Ju turned to exit. Wei Xian and Chu Kui, who had been waiting in the neighboring room, quickly opened the curtains, one person holding them aside while another came over to support her to welcome Qing Ju out. Both Wei Xian and Chu Kui were originally from the Wang Fu. They understood that even though Wang Fei treated them with courtesy, but compared to Yin Lu, Mu Jin, Jin Zhan, and Yu Zan, there was a difference in the amount of trust. The events that happened in the previous days would have magnified the difference. It was their luck that Wang Fei was weak. If she was just a bit stronger, they would have been thrown out. Who else would let them stay as first-rank Yawan? Sitting down at a round pear wood table carved with safflower, Qing Ju's eyes swept across the table. A goblet of wine-stewed pork shoulder, a bowl of swallow's next porridge with strands of black chicken accompanied by a multitude of similar fatty sides. The only dish that looked light was a small dish of sautéed lettuce stems. Waving away Shu Kui, who had moved forward to serve her, Qing Ju looked at the people bowing at the entrance with a smile on her face. You are the ones that deliver food from the kitchen. Wang Fei, Nikkei holds duties in the kitchen. Those people didn't why Wang Fei would ask such a question, but they replied without any fear on their faces. Such a good Wang Fu's kitchen. Qing Ju nonchalantly leaned back on her seat. Under the confused gazes of the others, her face darkened and then her hand swept the goblet of wine-stewed pig shoulder to the floor. Very quickly, the room became saturated with the smell of meat. Take them away and beat them. Nobody managed to respond. They didn't know why Wang Fei, who had a personality as soft as mud, would suddenly act up, and so nobody moved for a time. What is it? This a Wang Fei, cannot command you now. Qing Ju's large eyes narrowed. She stood and looked at the people in the room. Or is it that you all feel that it is natural and proper for the kitchen to slight me? After being swept over by Wang Fei's gaze, everybody shook and managed to respond. A few of the Taijian and the stronger mamas rushed to the forefront and acted as they were going to drag the kitchen servants away. The servants that were dragged away didn't dare struggle and only begged for mercy. One servant even yelled slander, proclaiming that what they had served Wang Fei was the best food from the kitchen. Flashing a look at the servant shouting slander, Qing Ju's brow rose and she said quietly, "What are you standing around for? Drag them down, administer the punishment here. I want to see you carry it out." Upon hearing this, a quick-witted Taijian took out a handkerchief and stuffed it in that servant's mouth. He immediately started to drag the person towards the yard. The strength in his not-so-considerable body wasn't small. Seeing the situation, the others followed and dragged the others down. A few clever servants set up a table and chair before spreading out refreshments while waiting for Wang Fei to come see the punishment. "What is that Taijian called? I see that he has some strength," Qing Ju asked Shu Kui, who was supporting her as she stepped out. Answering Wang Fei, "That little Taijian is called Xiao Gao Zi, he sweeps the yard." Shu Kui's voice held reverence that she wasn't even aware of, and even her movements were more subservient than in the past. "It doesn't look like he is very tall. Why don't we change his name to Huang Yang, to be an interior Taijian?" Qing Ju smiled gently. When she walked out into the yard, the servants were already tied to the long benches and were under the long planks. Sitting down on the prepared chair, Qing Ju mentally counted to 20. Then she slowly and calmly said, "Other than the one that talked back, stop on the other 3. Looking at the 3 who endured their pain as they knelt and thanked her, Qing Ju raised her cup and took a sip. "A lot of people here are likely very confused as to why I punished you." The heavy sound of flesh under blunt force rang in the ears of the 3 kneeling. They didn't dare wipe the sweat on their foreheads as they kowtowed and said they didn't dare. "I'm a reasonable person, but it is just that you, as part of the kitchen, has become intolerable. I cannot do anything other than punish you." Setting down the cup in her hand, Qing Ju's voice seemed slightly helpless. Even if Wang Fei didn't hold the favor of Wang Ye, she was still the Wang Fei that the emperor had personally decreed marriage on. Did a kitchen dare act intolerably to her? Even though everyone present felt something wrong, nobody dared argue. Didn't they see the person who had just been yelling slander was still getting a beating? Who in this Wang Fu doesn't know that I'm ill? The Tai I had previously ordered what I shouldn't be eating. But look at what you have served every day. Qing Ju gave a small sigh, her face full of sadness, almost as though she was a bullied stalk of little cabbage. "I know you are cannot be bothered to treat an ill Wang Fei. I felt the same too, death was an end. But since I've recovered, I want to have a good life. You purposefully deliver oily foods, is it in hopes that I would get ill and die earlier?" After finishing, she sighed in woe. If it wasn't that somebody was still enduring a beating, her look would have made others feel pity. The three servants started to kowtowing again, wanting to explain but didn't dare to. They were afraid Wang Fei would say disobedience against their zuzi and continue their beating. Seeing that the kowtowing had gone on long enough, Qing Ju waved her hand weakly as though she had been severely wounded emotionally. "That's fine, you can stop now and I'll leave." Finishing, she turned to Wei Xian who was right behind her. "Give some ointment to them. These people must be essential in this fu, we can't let them not attend to their vital duties." The four kneeling felt despair rise. Since Wang Fei said they were important and held vital duties, then tomorrow, even if they had to crawl, they had to be doing their jobs, unless they wanted to be thrown out of the fu. But they were servants that had signed a death contract. What good outcome would await them if they were thrown out? Finished ordering everything, Qing Ju slowly stood and turned to look at the Ce Fei and Shiki that had arrived at some unknown time. Her face made a surprised expression. "When did you all arrive? Since you are here now, then come in." Done speaking, she didn't care to what their faces showed. She took Shu Kui's hand and walked into her rooms. Chapter 2 Ce Fei is Still Qie. The Ce Fei and Shiki didn't think that they would see a beautiful play of brute force once they stepped into the Zheng Yuan. They looked suspiciously at Wang Fei and then at the servants who were at their limits due to pain but didn't dare show it in their twisted expressions. What had happened here? Seeing that Wang Fei was walking into the room, the four didn't care whether if it was respectful or not and followed. Only Feng Ce Fei, when she passed, ordered for the people get carried back. However, when she saw that no servant in the surroundings moved, her expression changed and she didn't speak further. At the front, Yin Lu and Jin Zhan lowered their heads as they guided the others along and held the curtains open for the four. From far away, they saw Mujin and Yuzan coming over with meal boxes. They stopped walking and waited for the two to come close. Seeing that those two weren't clear as to what had happened, the four exchanged glances and looked at the servants who had suddenly become more obedient in the yard before lifting the curtain to enter the rooms. The rooms had already been cleaned. The smell of meat had been covered by burning fragrance. But Qing Ju didn't like the smell and couldn't resist looking at the flying cane and golden beast brazier. Wei Xian went forward immediately to extinguish the incense, changing it for a fainter, less fragrant one. Seeing Wang Fei's expression relax slightly, she breathed a sigh of relief as well. Look at how clever Wang Fei's Yawan is. No wonder that even Wang Ye complimented your Yawan, Feng Ce Fei said with a faint smile as she bowed slightly to Qing Ju. She was laughing at the fact that a few days earlier, Wang Ye had taken one of Qing Ju's Yawan as a tongfang. One she dared to do so because of Wang Yi's favor but no one else dared to follow. Who knew that when she finished, Qing Ju didn't even spare a look at her, as though she, a living breathing person, didn't even exist. The room settled into a heavy silence. Holding Shu Kui's hand as she sat, Qing Ju saw Mujin and Yuzan entering with the meal boxes. She spoke, "Serve it up." The boxes were opened. Various types of porridge were displayed out. A bowl of lotus and lily porridge, a goblet of 8 treasures chicken soup, a few small vegetable dishes and desserts that were elegant yet light. Steam rose from each dish. Just one glance was enough to see how much effort had been put in. It looks like there are at least some that have skill in the kitchen. Give those that cooked a reward of 5 taels of silver each. Qing Ju held a fine ceramic spoon and took a taste of porridge. She looked at Han Qinghe, who was standing to one side. She was one of the Shiki in the Wang Fu. Her status was very low but she was very good at being obedient. Even if she wasn't very favored, it wasn't that she wasn't favored at all. I heard that Wang Ye said you were very good at service, so today, you can serve the food. The porridge was passable and Qing Ju's mood seemed to have lightened. Seeing Han Qi dawdling about, she wasn't irritated but asked in a slow voice, "Oh, Han Shiki isn't willing." Nu doesn't dare. Han Qi's face showed a hint of humiliation. But the person in front of her was Wang Fei. She was only a Shiki, and it was in the natural order that she was to serve Wang Fei. Even if she didn't want to, Did she dare do otherwise? The other three looked in disbelief at Qing Ju, who had lowered her head to drink porridge. Was Wang Fei crazy? Even though Han Shiki wasn't very favored, but she had been with Wang Ye for a long time and was the one that had taught Wang Ye. Wang Fei, a not favored Wang Fei, really dared to order Han Shiki to serve her food. Not caring what others were thinking, Qing Ju blocked the chopstick of shepherd's purse and pheasant Han Shi had picked up. I don't like this dish. Remember to not serve this one next time. Han Shi's expression changed slightly, the hand that held the chopsticks tightened, but she didn't argue. In the end, she only woodenly bowed. May Wang Fei have mercy. Nu has served Wang Ye for a long time, and assumed that Wang Fei would like the same dishes as Wang Ye. Nu thought wrong. This was telling her that she had seniority with Wang Ye. Qing Ju smiled but didn't speak, turning her gaze to a dish of lettuce stems and pig stomach. Sometimes, silence was the greatest humiliation. Everybody could see that Wang Fei didn't even look properly at Han Shiki, as though this woman wasn't different from any other Shiki who had to hold curtains and serve food for the wife in other noble families. Qing Ju took a long time to use her morning meal. Feng Fei and the others stood until their legs felt soft, but they never received a word to sit, so they could only stand at one side, and look upon Qing Ju elegantly ordering Han Shiki to serve her food. Is there something Wang Fei has called us here for? Seeing Qing Ju finally setting down her chopstick, the Fei Feng Ziijin couldn't resist any longer. Her face still held a warm smile, or did Wang Fei call us here just for conversation? Qing Ju took the tea that Jinzan held to rinse and used rose and lemon water to wash her hands. The smooth cotton fabric wiped away the droplets on her fingertips. Qing Ju finally looked at Feng Ziijin. I've always heard that Feng Fei's personality was as soft as water, but today I've seen that this rumor is true. Your personality just as rushed and impatient as boiling water is. Standing to the right of Feng Ziijin was Fei Zhang Yangsu, who upon hearing this, buried her head deeper to disguise the smile at the corner of her lips. This Feng Ziijin always loved using a warm and friendly facade to evoke the pity of Wang Ye, but Wang Fei purposefully said the exact opposite. It could be seen that Wang Fei didn't really have the personality of mud. It seems that this Wang Fei who had just entered the Wang Fu, had her own way of doing things. Seeing Qing Ju laughing at her expense, Feng Ziijin felt anger rise, but the smile on her face became even warmer. Wang Fei is making a joke. Nu doesn't deserve such compliments. Wang Fei's open mind and innocent heart is what Nu and others admire. What Ben Wang Fei is like, the emperor already stated very clearly when the marriage was bestowed. Qing Ju smiled as her gaze swept across Feng Ziijin quickly, as though she was very surprised that a little Qi dared to discuss the behavior of a wife. The emperor's words are golden, his eyes are of a dragon, his pupils of a phoenix. He naturally sees more clearly than anybody else in this world. Anything that Feng Ziijin wanted to say was blocked by these words. What could she say? Wang Fei had been handpicked personally by the emperor. She was only a little Qi, she couldn't say a word against the emperor. Even Wang Ye didn't dare say anything about that. As of the present, there were 4 imperial sons that had lived to adulthood. The emperor was reaching his 6th decade. The struggle for the throne hadn't floated to the surface, but underneath, it was already storms and clouds. No imperial son would want to throw dirty water on himself. Wang Fei dared to say something as audacious as this. It was clearly using the situation to her advantage. She was clearly relying on the fact that Wang Ye couldn't repudiate her, his wife. Thinking back to the words on the imperial decree of marriage, something like naturally outstanding, virtuous, and of good fortune. If the emperor declared Qing Ju was virtuous and of good fortune, who dared say otherwise? Thinking there, the smile on Feng Ziijin's face froze and she made a full bow. Wang Fei have mercy, Nu spoke wrongly. It is fine to say whatever in front of me, since once the door is closed, everybody is a member of Duan Wang Fu. But if you slip outside, if others say I cannot maintain discipline, it would be a minor matter, but if you shame Duan Wang Fu, it would be a different matter altogether. Qing Ju sighed lightly. Technically, you have great seniority in this Wang Fu, I shouldn't need to say more, it has wasted my words. The fact that Wang Fei is concerned for us knew, it is our honor, it is not wasted. Zhang Yongyu, who had been standing silently by one side the entire time, came forward and performed a bow. Nu may have spent more time in this Fu but is not as respected and valued as Wang Fei and not as knowledgeable. Wang Fei's attentions have taught Nu. The other three didn't think Zhang Yongyu would lower herself to such a respectful attitude. They felt disdain inside but on the outside, their faces all showed looks of agreement. Feng Ziijin looked once at Zhang Yongyu. Inside she thought disdainfully, it was obvious that she wasn't of high birth, that she would even curry favor with an unfavored Wang Fei. Taking in all of the expressions, Qing Ju held her chin in one hand on the carved wooden armrest, her right index finger tapping on the chair. Of the four women in front of her, Feng Ziijin's birth was the best. Her father was a third-rank assistant minister of the Ministry of Works. Zhang Yongyu's father was only a sixth-rank official in the Ministry of Works. The other two Shiki was of even lower birth. Han Qinghe's father was only an eighth-rank official. It was only the fact that she taught Duan Wang on matters of adulthood that she was elevated to become a Shiki. The other silent and often ignored Shiki was Wei Xian Qi. Her father was deceased and she had, along with her mother, depended on the support of her maternal uncle who was a seventh-rank official in the Department of Transportation. Looking at the appearance, Feng Ziijin was the most beautiful, followed by Zhang Yongyu. Similar to her name, Han Qinghe was very clean and Wei Xian Qi's appearance was just as unremarkable as her personality. These four simple-looking women and a few unable to be seen publicly Tongfang were enough to cause the original to be majorly ill. It could be seen that they weren't so simple after all. Naturally it would be good to remember, Qing Ju stood, holding Mu Jin's hand as she started walking outside. The four, seeing her movements, obediently followed to the yard. The yard had been cleaned, not showing any signs that would allow an observer to find that an hour ago, there had been people undergoing a beating. Squinting as she took a look at the sky, Qing Ju then turned to look at the four women. Today's weather isn't bad, accompany me on a walk. After so many days ill, I didn't have the time to develop a relationship with you. We will remedy that bit by bit from now on. In any other Fu, when the wife was sick, which concubine didn't come to pay their respects? It was only the concubines in Duan Wang Fu that had the guts to only send presents but didn't come in person. The original endured, but she didn't have to continue. Listening to Wang Fei's warm voice saying words with a heavy undertone, Wei Xian Qi, who had the least courage, couldn't help but shudder. She had originally thought to pay respects daily but Feng Fei didn't do so. She was only an unfavored Shiki and couldn't even say additional words, or walk an extra step. Now that Wang Fei wanted to settle old scores, Feng Fei was fine with Wang Yi's favor, but she had no such favor. What could she do now? Zhang Yongyu, after hearing this, stopped and then looked at Feng Ziijin. She didn't have Wang Yi's favor but due to the fact she understood her position, her life in the Wang Fu could be considered not too good or too bad. Today, upon seeing Wang Fei, she peculiarly felt that Wang Fei had some element of power. The woman walking in front of her looked the same, but didn't have that personality of mud. The beating of the servants in the morning had been Wang Fei making an example, otherwise she wouldn't have made such a ruckus. Any nobleman with no problems in their brain would always give the wife some measure of respect, especially somebody as intelligent as Wang Ye. In the past, Wang Fei had been soft and didn't care to take up the issues and so nothing had happened. Now that Wang Fei wanted to bother with it, nothing would be smoothed over just because Feng Ziijin was favored. Wang Fei didn't have the attention and love of her father and stepmother at home but she had an influential maternal family. Wang Ye wasn't a person without any ambition and naturally knew how to respect his wife. She looked sympathetically at Feng Ziijin who was walking in front of her once, then Zhang Yongyu shifted her gaze away. She saw that a procession that was making their way towards them. At the very front was the master of this fu, Duan Qin Wang. Chapter 3 Wang Ye. From very far away, He Hung had seen a procession of people in the garden, but it had been too far to see everybody clearly. The woman at the very front, he didn't see clearly, but from her movements, he could tell he was unfamiliar with her. Ming He, can you see who is it at the front? He had just left the royal court, and didn't want to spare the effort to deal with these women. After he spoke, he stopped in his steps, his expression of one who was fed up. Wang Ye, this one sees that it seems to be a procession of Feng Cifei and Zhang Cifei. Ming He opened his eyes wide for a look before quickly lowering his head. He might be an eunuch, but he didn't dare to look straight at his master's women. Then who is it at the front? He Hung squinted his eyes to look at the woman at the very front. Doesn't look very familiar. Ming He quickly raised his head again. The woman walking at the very front had an extraordinary aura. He didn't know what flowers were embroidered on that wide-sleeved silk dress, but it seemed beautiful. For a while, he really didn't recognize who it was. He spoke hesitantly, maybe it's Wang Fei. Even Ming He himself didn't believe what he said, but other than Wang Fei, what woman in this fu dared to walk in front of a Cifei? Hearing Ming He mention Wang Fei, He Hung remembered that woman with a soft personality. Her father was the Duke of Changde, her maternal uncle was the Xiangqing Marquis and also Supreme Justice of the court. Her birth was not in any way ordinary, but she was raised to have that kind of personality. No wonder when his Mufti chose Chu Shi, nobody tried to interfere. Qing Ju saw from far away what the original in her memory had feared, Duan Wang. His appearance was that of a 20-year-old, tall and of good posture. He was wearing a white robe edged in black, with a white jade coronet. The first impression one would get would be that of a giant among men, a dragon among humans. After they walked closer, she saw that there was a hint of a smile on Duan Wang's face, but there was no mirth in his eyes. Slightly bowing, Qing Ju smiled and opened. Wang Ye has finished court, is there a need for nourishment? Wang Fei has recovered. He Heng's gaze landed on that porcelain wrist, the red of the phoenix blood rock contrasting with the pale skin so that the wrist looked as though it would break with a touch. Thanks to Wang Yi's good fortune, Qing Ju smiled falsely, using a handkerchief to wipe at the inconspicuous sweat on her forehead. It is just that my body is weak and the Tai had already ordered me to a diet. Who knew that the kitchen servants would only pay lip service and send restricted and oily foods? I was so angry at the time, I pushed them with a bit of a beating. Zhang Yongyu, hearing Wang Fei mention this incident to Wang Ye, couldn't resist looking at Wang Ye. She saw that the other's expression was normal, obviously not placing any importance on this type of matter. It was true that He Hung didn't care for this type of incident, but he was a bit surprised that Wang Fei was actually able to order and carry out a punishment. Even though he held no good feelings towards Wang Fei, but it wasn't that he would embarrass her in this type of situation. To servants that won't serve faithfully, it wouldn't be a pity to throw them out. Wang Yi's consideration is the great fortune of Qi. If Wang Yi's personality was really what she hypothesized, he was a controlled and ambitious man. She lowered her eyes and face, not smiling at him any longer. In her past life, she was considered a successful manager. What type of man she hadn't seen before? This Wang Ye wasn't peerless in his beauty, she didn't care that much. He Hung saw that the other had no intentions of speaking further and turned to his other women. He saw that while Feng Shi's face had a smile, it seemed to hold traces of humiliation. He looked once at Wang Fei and saw she had lowered her head. At the end, he only nodded, since you have gotten better, it is beneficial for you to exercise outside. Finishing, he left behind the crowd of women for his study. After He Hung left, Qing Ju turned to look at Feng Ziijin, her eyes slightly narrowed. She reached out with her right hand to lift a fine and glowing chin, and used a tone softer than silk. This face of Feng Cifei, the more you look, the more you fall in love. Finishing, the thumb smoothed over the curve of the face until it felt Feng Cifei shudder before retreating. She used her handkerchief to scrub gently at her thumb and index finger, "That's fine, I'm tired. You can all leave now." Finishing, she held Jin Zhan's hand and turned to leave. Feng Ziijin looked at the handkerchief that Wang Fei had thrown to the ground after she took 3 steps away, and her face, which usually held a warm smile, froze in anger. This was a great humiliation. What made her even more angry was that she had felt fear under Qing Ju's gaze. What was Qing Ju worth? How dumb and dull she was, that she dared treat her like this. At this moment she felt that the other 3 beside was having a laugh at her expense. She swept them, her face dark as she scolded, "What are you looking at? Leave immediately." The 2 Shiki quickly took a bow before leaving, but Zhang Yongyu, who was of the same rank as her, slowly opened her mouth and said, "Mimi should return to your rooms early, I will leave first." Finishing, she didn't stay to look at Feng Ziijin's expression as she turned and walked away. Qing Ju. Feng Ziijin, with a dark face, stomped a few times on the handkerchief on the ground before walking, full of rage, back to Xi Yuan. "Wang Fei, you really humiliated Feng Fei today." Jin Zhan felt satisfied yet worried. "If Wang Ye knew, and blamed you." "There's no need for worry," Qing Ju laughed lightly, her gaze looking towards the study. "Wang Ye isn't the average person. This type of man, he wouldn't care about small things. As long as she, as his Wang Fei, didn't do anything to damage the interests of Duan Wang, at this point, would respect her, as his Wang Fei. Even though Chang de Gongfu didn't care for her, but her Juju was titled a marquis and was the supreme justice. Her Jamu's father was the Minister of Defense. The couple only had 2 sons and no daughters, and was very attentive to her, their niece. If it wasn't for those 2, how else would the original have protected her mother's dowry? Duan Wang might not need to depend on Wang Fei to accomplish things, but it was true he would never favor a key over a wife to create conflict with those people. At this time, every imperial son was restless, and Duan Wang wasn't an unambitious person. She wasn't the type of person live in discomfort. If she really had to live in hardship and unpleasantness for her entire life, it would be better for her to just jump into a pond right now. As to how Duan Wang would treat her if he gained the throne, she was too lazy to think that much. Who knows what would happen in the future? Even if she was really virtuous and generous, it didn't appear that this Duan Wang would like her very much. Jin Zhan didn't understand the meaning in Wang Fei's words, but since Wang Fei didn't explain, she didn't dare ask. She, along with Mujin and the others, carefully walked Wang Fei back to Zheng Yuan and then saw the steward of the kitchen had been waiting for a long time. The moment the kitchen steward saw them, he immediately came up and took a formal bow and rushed into a list of explanations and requests for mercy. They were very misfortunate. In the past days, they had sent the same items to Wang Fei, but nobody knew that Wang Fei would pick today to erupt. If it was only that, then it wouldn't have been so major. But just now, even Ming He Gong, who served by Wang Yi's side, came by to berate them. The original steward was discharged. He had originally been the assistant steward and managed to take advantage of the gap to become the steward. He didn't dare overstep, so he had come very early to Zheng Yuan to make his apologies. Qing Ju looked at this steward. He wasn't very talk and looked very simple and honest. He did seem very obedient, but to become a steward in this Wang Fu, nobody was honest. She was weary of his apologies and said, "What the kitchen is like, I don't care, but if in the future I find you are not attentive, you don't need to kneel here." The steward nodded frantically and handed over a menu, saying that it was for Wang Fei to pick the dishes for today and tomorrow morning. "In the past, you have always said that everything was according to protocol, so it isn't possible to order." Qing Ju didn't take the menu, only smiled at the steward. Upon hearing this, the steward immediately said, "It was probably one of the messengers that said it wrong. It is true that Wang Fei's food is mandated by the protocols, but it is possible to order dishes among the protocols." Finishing, he started to castigate the messenger for being dumb and misunderstanding. Qing Ju didn't want to hear any more wasteful talk and said, "Fine, I know you will be attentive. Yin Lu, give me the menu. On the menu once it reached her hand, there was all the ways of cooking, all kinds of dishes. She picked a few dishes that she liked and spoke, in the morning, I don't like using oily or heavy foods. The kitchen can cook like normal, if it meets my preferences, naturally there will be rewards. The steward felt a heavy weight. Who knew what things suited this Wang Fei's appetite? His mouth kept repeating that Wang Fei was generous and compassionate and so on. Sending away the kitchen steward, Yin Lu massaged Qing Ju's shoulders and said hatefully, "This pile of useless and spineless cowards." The pressure of Yin Lu's massage was perfect. Qing Ju leaned back comfortably on the recliner. Hearing Yin Lu's remark, she smiled and said, "In this world, there are many people but they are all this way. It is not worth it to be angry over a small insignificant steward." Mu Jin came in carrying with a goblet of date and honey tea. Hearing what Wang Fei said, she laughed, and said, "Wang Fei is right, newbie thinks that from now on, there wouldn't be any more disobedient servants." Qing Ju opened her eyes and sighed over those words. "In the past, I always thought the best of others, but it is today that I have decided to use goodness to repay goodness, use evil to repay evil. That is the way to live in the imperial family." Mu Jin smiled and placed the teacup on the redwood table. She pulled a thin blanket over Qing Ju. "If Wang Fei thinks like this, it is a good thing." In all the first-rank Yawan, she was the oldest. In the beginning, when Furen had brought her and taken her into the Fu, the little mistress had only been a year old. Now, the little mistress has become a Wang Fei and she was over 2 decades. She had said very early on that she didn't wish to marry, her only desire to guard beside Wang Fei. Now that Wang Fei had changed, it was for the best. Qing Ju looked at Mu Jin and thought back to the meaning of the flower Mu Jin. Resolve. This name was appropriate for this woman in front of her. It was one of the good things the original had, this Yawan who always wanted the best for her. Closing her eyes, Qing Ju didn't look at the sincere concern in the other's eyes. Mu Jin's wish, I understand. Mu Jin's eyes became red but she smiled and said, "Wang Fei's words are embarrassing newbie." Finishing, she covered her face and left. In the study, he hung folded closed a missive and waited for it to dissolve in a bowl of water before saying to Ming He, "Don't touch what's happening in the south, De Ji and San Di is fighting very fiercely. It's better for me to watch from the sidelines." Ming He nodded. He saw the pieces of the missive dissolved in the bowl and turned to a new topic. "Wang Ye, the people in the kitchen have been reprimanded. The new steward seems to be a smart one, he already went to Zheng Yuan to ask for mercy." He hung nodded and didn't pay much attention, only saying, "Chu Xi is Ben Wang's wife. What she is due, she will receive." Thinking back to Chu Xi's vibrant new appearance that was contrary to the past plain one, his brow moved slightly. "As to how Wang Fei does in the future, we will wait and see." Ming He nodded silently. This was between the Zuzi and the female Zuzi. He was a servant and naturally had no opinion. But he kept on sensing that today's Wang Fei was different from before. It wasn't just the change in wardrobe, even the gaze had changed. As the main steward of the Fu, he had seen Wang Fei a few times before. He kept on feeling that Wang Fei seemed to have from an unnoticeable grey bunny transformed to a fierce female fox. Recognizing he was guessing about his masters, Ming He buried his head deeper. Amy Tofo, he should be punished. Chapter 4 Embarrassment. A new day had arrived. The Ce Fei and Shiki of the Wangfu obediently came to the Zheng Yuan to pay their respects. The result was that they had waited for almost an hour but didn't manage to see Wang Fei's face. The other 3 were still all right, only sitting there woodenly. But Feng Ziijin's face showed a hint of impatience. Even so, even she didn't dare turn and leave. Taking a drink of tea to suppress the impatience inside, Feng Ziijin asked in a quiet voice to her Yawan behind her, "Chun Yu, what time is it now?" Chun Yu looked outside. The sun had already risen. She could only say, "Mistress, it's already past 9. Zhang Yongyu coldly observed the motions of Feng Ziaijin and her servant. She lowered her gaze to her lotus-colored dress as though she was an unfeeling piece of wood, waiting for Wang Fei to arrive. After another 15 minutes, they finally saw Wang Fei's first-ranked Yawan Mujin slowly walk out, a face full of remorse. She bowed deeply to the four, Ce Fei and Yuniang, please return. Wang Fei said that paying respects daily is a torment and that paying respects every 3 days would be enough. Wang Fei is considerate. They waited for the better part of the morning, but they only received these few words. The insides of these four present were complicated and varied, but their expression was the same. As one of the Ce Fei and the senior one on top of that, Zhang Yongyu came up front and smiled, agreeing, then we wouldn't disturb Wang Fei any further. Wang Fei is very busy every day. If there had been a notice yesterday, there would be no need for a disturbance today. It was us that was rude. Feng Ziaijin smiled mirthlessly and followed with, I am a rough kind of person, very undisciplined. I'm never good at the fine details, so Wang Fei will have to forgive me. Listening to Feng Ce Fei's ambiguous words, Mujin's smile didn't waver and she bowed again. Feng Ce Fei has no need to worry. Wang Fei is always lenient and wouldn't be moved to anger over small things. The two pairs of eyes met. Mujin's gaze held laughter, a lowered chin giving the impression of respect. Feng Ce Fei's smile gradually became colder and in the end, she only took her Yawan Chunyu and Xiayun and left. The other three were much more courteous and left the Zheng Yuan with smiles on their faces. Coming out of the Zheng Yuan, the three released a breath. Luo Yanqiu couldn't help but say, now Zhengjai Yuan's atmosphere has become frightening. Zhang Yongyu smiled but there was no mirth in her eyes, that one is Wang Fei. Whether I am favored or not, I cannot displease her. Han Qinghe was the eldest among those four and had been the Yawan arranged by the Department of Household Affairs to Wan Zhai's side to teach him about adult matters. She didn't like what Zhang Yongyu said, but she couldn't help but agree on the inside. She had assumed that Wang Fei would get her to serve at breakfast again, but who knew that she made them leave without even showing up? If there is Wang Yi's favor, then it's fine, if there is no favor, she grimaced and looked back at the Zheng Yuan, will there be good days in the future? After these words came out, the three became silent. At present, none of them had children and nobody could be certain of the future. If Wang Fei wanted to torment them, only a few words could accomplish it. Inside the Zheng Yuan, Qing Ju finished her ablutions and sat in front of the copper mirror, playing with a jade scepter. Seeing Mujin coming in, she then lazily stood, holding Yin Liu's hand to sit down at the table in the outer room. She asked, were any of them unsatisfied? The others were fine, but Feng Ce Fei said a few words. Mujin came front to serve her a few chopsticks of food. She smiled and said, Newbie wasn't too courteous to her, so when Feng Ce Fei left, her face didn't look so good. Motioning for her to stop, Qing Ju rinsed her mouth before speaking, that's a good way of dealing with it. People say that the gatekeeper of the Prime Minister is akin to a 7th-rank official, you are my 1st-rank Yawan, every action you take represents our Zheng Yuan. You can be courteous but you cannot be weak. Before, when I retreated a step, I didn't see any of them respect me one single bit. Hearing what Wang Fei said, Mujin understood that Wang Fei was putting her in the first spot. She became excited but kept her smile, Newbie will remember. Qing Ju nodded and started to eat. After she put down the chopsticks, it was rinsing and washing again. After everything was put in its place, it was the beginning of a new day. Wang Fei, Newbie doesn't understand, why let the Cfi and Shiki pay respects every 3rd day, Yin Lu asked in bewilderment, not saying anything about other compounds, but even in Chang de Gongfu, the Ji mistress had the Yuniang come pay respects every day. What benefit do I get if they come every day? I wouldn't even be able to have a good breakfast. Qing Ju held their hands to cross over the doorway. She looked at the spread of green in the yard and her mood lightened, I'm too lazy to wake up and prepare every day to wait for them to come pay their respects. Yin Lu nodded in understanding, carefully holding Wang Fei's hand as they walked into the yard. This yard wasn't small, it had the required elements of a false mountain, water, a bridge, and blooming flowers. The servants were doing their duties, but Yin Lu felt that this yard was too quiet. Wang Fei, do you want that little Tajian that you wanted to put into the interior yard come over and kowtow? Mu Jin saw Wang Fei stand on the bridge using fish feed to tease the fish in the water and spoke quietly, if there is no meeting, what is to be his duties? Dropping all of the feed in her grasp into the water and seeing a swarm of golden fish flash by, Qing Ju smiled and said, let him come over. A short while later, she saw that Tajian, whose name she had changed to Huang Yang, kneeling in front of her. Qing Ju examined him closely. His face was clean and seemed very obedient. She smiled suddenly, stand up. The Tajian in this yard need a leader. In the future, you will be in charge of these Tajian. As to what you need to do, you just have to understand inside. After her words, she saw this Huang Yang kneel down again to thank her. Qing Ju looked once at Mu Jin. Mu Jin has served many years at my side. If there is anything you do not understand, you will ask her. Huang Yang confirmed and bowed to Mu Jin. Mu Jin returned the greeting and laughed. Wang Fei has selected you because you were obedient. You should try to live up to Wang Fei's hope. Please don't worry, Mu Jin Gunyang. Nu will be careful in service of Wang Fei. Huang Yang didn't say any superfluous words. It could be seen that Wang Fei didn't like listening to useless things. Seeing the situation, Mu Jin nodded inside. He didn't seem to be of any great use, but at least had a good eye for detail and wasn't so dumb. What Wang Fei had just said, it was to make declare that all the servants in the Niiwan would be under her charge. She had no way of reciprocating except take note of every small thing and always putting Wang Fei first. Huang Yang hadn't thought that he would receive Wang Fei's attentions, and he was ecstatic on the inside. To say nothing of bowing to Mu Jin, if he had to kowtow a few times, he would do it willingly. After retreating, his face finally revealed his state of excitement. Turning his head back to look at Wang Fei on the bridge, he thought, who said Wang Fei was a wood-like person? He didn't think there was a woman in the Wang Fu that could outcompete Wang Fei Niang Niang. Seeing Huang Yang retreat, Qing Ju sighed and leaned in boredom on a post on the bridge. She suddenly heard a serene stream of flute music from far away. The sound was both full of worry and like the cries of a woman. She looked in the direction of the flute and asked suspiciously, why is there flute music at this time? The faces of Mu Jin and the others changed slightly, but nobody spoke. Seeing the situation, Qing Ju smiled and said, or is it that I am forbidden from knowing this? Wang Fei, over there is Kui Yu Yuan. Supposedly, a huaqi that one of the officials gave to Wang Ye is living there. Mu Jin, seeing Wang Fei didn't seem affected, continued onwards. Newbie heard this huaqi called Yunqing is famous in the capital. She's skilled in the zither, go, calligraphy and painting. Wang Ye frequently visits her, but Yunqing Gunyang's personality is very virtuous, so she is still a Gunyang. The meaning was that Wang Ye hadn't managed to get a taste of this huaqi yet. Qing Ju laughed and her interest in the flute halved. If she was really noble and virtuous, who would let another gift her into this Wang Fu and then put out this attitude? Seeing but not touching was an eternally successful skill of all beautiful women. She clapped her hands and then Qing Ju held Yin Liu's hand, let's go elsewhere. They hadn't walked a few steps before seeing an unfamiliar little Tajian run over. Upon seeing Qing Ju, he made a full bow, Nikkei Xiao Ganzi greets Wang Fei. Wang Ye has commanded Nikkei to tell Wang Fei he is coming over to Zhengyuan for the noon meal. Ben Wang Fei knows. It took a few seconds for Qing Ju's brains to remember that this Xiao Ganzi was one of the frequently used Tajian of Duan Wang. She nodded to confirm her understanding. Wang Ye has returned already. Xiao Ganzi answered, back already, but hasn't entered the Fu yet when he met the Royal Highness Chang Wang, so he let Nikkei send a message. It will probably be a while before his return. It was like that then. The sounds of the flute Kui Yu Yuan, did they appear due to Duan Wang's presence? That time would have been the time that Duan Wang was returning. The flute sounds were too much of a coincidence. It was so sad that nobody was there to admire such beautiful sounds. Why didn't she go take some pleasure from it? Since Wang Ye wouldn't be returning very quickly, then let the kitchen prepare the noon meal. Somebody go to Kui Yuan and inform them that Ben Wang Fei likes Yunqing Gunyang's flute and will visit shortly. Qing Ju touched the butterflies in flight of the biao in her hair and smiled happily. Xiao Ganji stood in shock for a beat before bowing and leaving, turning towards Kui Yuan. Even though Wang Ye had some minor interest in that women living in Kui Yuan, but as somebody who had served at Wang Yi's for many years, he understood that a small insignificant Huqi wasn't as important as Wang Fei. Entering Kui Yuan, he saw Yunqing Gunyang who was playing the flute under the grape trellis. He didn't pay attention to the others' music. Walking forward, Xiao Ganzi stated, Yunqing Gunyang, Wang Fei enjoyed your flute. In a short while, she will be deigned to arrive, so please prepare. The sounds of the flute instantly stopped. Yu Qing looked coldly at Xiao Ganzi and faintly said, my place here is much too small, it isn't worthy for Wang Fei to lower herself to come. Hearing this, Xiao Ganzi laughed strangely, whether your place is good or not, I do not know, but it is an honor that Wang Fei wants to come. You only have to prepare. Or does Wang Fei have to report to you? Just a plaything, did she really think she was of importance? This entire Wang Fu, unless it was the few used by Wang Ye, who dared to talk back to him this way. She was just too shameless and ignorant. Yun Qin saw Xiao Ganzi sweep away, her youthful face turning colors, unspeakably grotesque. Chapter 5 I am a protector of beautiful women. Kui Yuan was located in the west side of the Wang Fu. It was a bit out of the way but the surroundings were neat and quiet. Qing Ju held Mu Jin's hand as she traveled through a half-moon door and Kui Yuan's entrance was in sight. The mamas guarding the door and the steward of Kui Yuan had been waiting at the door. Seeing Qing Ju, they quickly came up with smiles on their faces. The kitchen incident had already been spread to the entire Wang Fu. In a flash, no one dared to disobey Wang Fei. Didn't they see that even Wang Ye was on Wang Fei's side? They were only servants, who dared offend the Zuzi. Newbie greets Wang Fei, the mama who was the steward came forward and made a full bow. She then looked fawningly at the first-ranked Yawan, refreshments have been prepared inside, Wang Fei can come in and rest. I hope it didn't trouble you, Qing Ju inclined her head slightly. Disregarding the ingratiating smiles on the gatekeeping and steward mamas, she walked gracefully into Kui Yuan. Wang Fei clearly was very courteous to them but the two mamas felt that Wang Fei was full of nobility and pushed their own attitudes lower. Kui Yuan wasn't very big but it was of high quality. Qing Ju scanned the surroundings and at last, her gaze landed on the white-clad woman in the middle of the yard. Her hand holding a flute, the woman was very beautiful, wearing a wide-sleeved silk dress, almost as though she was untouched by mortal sins. She really didn't look like a Huqi that came out of a prostitute house. This was the first time Yunqing met the Wang Fei that was rumored to be not favored by Wang Ye. She had thought that it would just be a normal woman, but who knew it was such an eye-catching woman. Phoenix eyes and brows like the willow. She had a Fixian hair arrangement, the jewel on the headpiece perfectly falling between her eyebrows, contrasting with the porcelain skin. She wore a wide-sleeved dress made of shoe brocade the color of moonlight. It was so fitting and beautiful that it appeared as though the dress was made to be worn by her. Just the two ornaments tied at her waist were more valuable than all the belongings she ever had. This was the rumored Duan Wang Fei? Yunqing's mind stopped and she strangely felt inconceivably inferior. The hand that held the flute tightened. She performed a soft bow. Yunqing greets Wang Fei Niang Niang. Yunqing Gunyang doesn't have to be too courteous. Holding Mu Jin's hand, she sat down at the carved mahogany table underneath the grape trellis. She took a sip of the tea that a little Yawan presented. This tea is not bad. The water for this tea comes from the dew that I collect every morning. To be able to receive Wang Fei's compliments, it hasn't wasted my efforts. Wang Ye also likes this tea. Yunqing went forward 2 steps and smiled as she replied. Mu Jin heard how she addressed herself and frowned. She saw that Wang Fei's expression didn't change and her own expression recovered. The hand that held the cup stopped moving. Qing Ju placed the cup down. She used her handkerchief to wipe the corner of her mouth. I think that Yunqing Gunyang knows why Ben Wang Fei has come. I do not know if I have the luck to admire Yunqing Gunyang's flute. She didn't have the interest to drink the dew of this flower or that grass. Who knew if it was clean or not? Wang Fei, I'm not one of this Fu's musicians. Yunqing's face turned pale, as though she was humiliated, as she gazed at Qing Ju. Yunqing's skill is poor. I don't dare let it enter Wang Fei Niang's honorable ears. The moment the words came out, the entire yard suddenly quieted. One of the Yawan that served Yunqing was frightened to the point of visibly shaking. She wanted to curl into a ball and didn't have the courage to even look in Qing Ju's direction. Smiling at the other's attitude as though she would die rather than comply, Qing Ju threw the handkerchief she used onto the table, her hand supporting her chin, one slender hand picking a fine piece of pastry. How dare you? Mu Jin's face darkened, just a huqi that somebody gave as a present to the Wang Fu. How dare you talk to Wang Fei in this manner? You really are something that came from such an unclean place, no sense of good behavior. Come, slap her mouth. Yunqing's eyes suddenly widened. She didn't believe that Wang Fei would act against her. Wasn't she afraid that Wang Ye would feel she wasn't virtuous? Before Yunqing could finish her thoughts, she felt pain appear like fire on the left of her face. The person who had slapped her was the steward mama that always fawned over her in the past. She covered her face and exclaimed in a trembling voice, "You dare! Yunqing Gunyang! Sorry for the offense." The steward mama had a crying face as she gave Yunqing a few more slaps. Inside, she despaired. Today, she offended Yunqing and potentially enraged Wang Ye, but if she didn't offend Yunqing, she would definitely offend Wang Fei. She could only blame her bad luck to have been sent here to serve. Originally, she thought it would be a profitable position, but who knew that she would have to face the ugly truth. The beauty, after suffering the blows to the face, her originally beautiful visage became a sorry figure. Qing Ju raised her head and her eyebrow rose. What are we doing? Ben Wang Fei is a protector of beautiful women. Yunqing Gunyang is virtuous and innocent, you cannot create difficulties for her. Finishing, she looked playfully at Mu Jin. Mu Jin, apologize to Yunqing Gunyang. In the past, I saw that Yin Lu was the impatient one, I didn't think you would learn from her. The people present lowered their heads silently. Hearing Wang Fei scold Mu Jin Gunyang, they couldn't help but think in their minds that this was slapping somebody and beating them into the ground before saying that they were not violent. With this kind of strategy, Wang Fei wasn't a wooden person. If she was made out of wood, it was the soft and flexible willow tree. She let somebody get beat up, and then made them have to rage against the wind for being too harsh, causing the willow to accidentally whip somebody. Mu Jin heard Qing Ju's words and went forward a few steps. She stopped 5 paces away from Yunqing and bowed, "Yunqing Gunyang, please forgive me. Newbie has offended you today." Yunqing pushed aside the old posa that was in front of her. She covered her face with one hand and stared hatefully at Qing Ju. Mu Jin Gunyang is too serious. You are an important person of Wang Fei. Yunqing is a person of low status and doesn't dare blame you. Qing Ju's index finger gently tapped on the tabletop. Hearing Yunqing's words, her eyebrow rose and she smiled. Wang Ye feels heavy affection towards Yunqing Gunyang. How can you not be less than Mu Jin as a little Yawan? Finishing, she let servants bestow a healing salve. Seeing Yunqing behave as though she was humiliated, her smile grew wider. Since Yunqing Gunyang feels that Ben Wang Fei isn't worthy of hearing your flute, then we shan't speak of it further. The steward mama who had been pushed to one side let out a long heavy exhale. An ignorant thing, to act so in front of Wang Fei. Did she really believe she held a part of Wang Ye's heart? The Yawan behind Yu Qing's face grew paler and paler. After Qing Ju spoke, she was scared enough to suddenly kneel with a loud bang. In this Wang Fu, Wang Fei was ranked the highest other than Wang Ye. The way that her mistress acted, it was clearly not respecting Wang Fei. Not saying that Wang Ye's attitude towards her mistress was only that of one treating a plaything, but even if he truly favored her mistress wouldn't have a good outcome today. Wang Fei have mercy, Wang Fei have mercy, the Yawan continuously kowtowed. Yunqing Gunyang doesn't understand this Wang Fu's protocols, Wang Fei please have mercy. Jian Yun, what are you doing? Yunqing was covering her face but not one drop of tears fell down. She stubbornly widened her eyes, you didn't do anything wrong, why are you kneeling? Gunyang, please don't say any more. The Yawan that was kneeling was called Jian Yun. She despaired inside. In the few days she had been sent to serve Yunqing Gunyang, she had sensed that the way Yunqing acted would create conflict in the Wang Fu. After feeling apprehensive for a few days, the conflict really came. Thinking of the situation, she could only heavily kowtow twice again and didn't speak any more. Qing Ju sighed. She saw that this Jian Yun was only 13 or 14. Maybe it was the fact that this Yawan had stayed for a long time in this Wang Fu, that she saw more clearly than Yunqing did. She had no intentions of chastising this little Yawan. She motioned for one of the Yawan behind her to help this Jian Yun up. She had no more interest in looking at Yunqing's act of stubbornness and virtuous. She said to Mujin who was beside her, let's return. Since Yunqing Gunyang doesn't prefer this Wang Fu, then in the future this Kui Yu Yuan's allowance will be halved. Finishing, she pointed to Jian Yun, whose forehead was bleeding from the kowtowing, this Yawan doesn't have to serve here. Ben Wang Fei sees that she looks proper, she can go serve in the tea room. Upon hearing this, Jian Yun lit up. She was now one of Wang Fei's people. Flooded with happiness, she started thanking profusely. This yard is very busy today. Hearing this familiar yet strange voice, Qing Ju looked towards the door and saw Duan Wang come in with two Taijian. She had some impression of the two Taijian in Qing Ju's memories. They were the ones that served Duan Wang directly, Ming He and Qian Chong Xin. They had much more status with Duan Wang than Xiao Gan Zi. Qing Ju opened her mouth and heard Yunqing cry tragically, Wang Ye. This Wang Ye was said in a soft voice, like a bird crying, like a bell ringing, yet it had 1 part affection, 2 parts anger, 3 parts grief and 4 parts stubbornness. It was enough to stimulate, upon hearing it, pity and tenderness. Her lips curled in a smile. This Yunqing lived up to being a famous Huakui. No wonder that official came up and gave her away. Normal people couldn't manage somebody of this skill. In her previous life, she had seen the truths and falsehoods of the entertainment circle. In one look, she knew what this icy and clean Yunqing Gunyang really thought. He heard Yunqing's call and looked briefly at her before moving his gaze towards Qing Ju. Ben Wang heard Xiao Gan Zi say Wang Fei was here enjoying music. Why is there no music? Yunqing realized that something was wrong, her expression changing to be even more pitiful as she looked at He Hung. Who knew that the other's gaze was still on Wang Fei and didn't look once at her. It is Qi's fault to not know ahead of time that Wang Ye would also come to listen. Qing Ju walked to He Heng's side and looked pityingly at Yunqing's slightly swollen face. What can remedy this? He Hung finally looked at Yunqing's pitiful and sorry-looking face. He said callously, it's fine. In this state, there's no interest in admiring the music. Ben Wang should leave. Finishing, he looked at Qing Ju's slight smile and felt that the other's bio was swaying slightly, making his eyes itch. He added, after this, return earlier to Zheng Yuan. Ben Wang is still waiting to eat together with Wang Fei. Qi would never forget Wang Yi's words. Qing Ju laughed lightly, the motion of her eyes seemed carry magnetism, it should be Wang Ye that doesn't forget. He Hung couldn't resist reaching out to touch that trembling bio before smiling and leaving. Walking out of Kui Yuan, he turned and looked back once at Kui Yuan before saying to Jian Chong Xin and Ming He, Ben Wang remembers that there was a finely crafted golden luan in flight by Ao in the stores. Get somebody to deliver it to Zhen Yuan for Wang Fei to wear for her amusement. Jian Chong Xin and Ming He exchanged glances and quickly confirmed. They both were struck with realizations. In the past, they had only seen Wang Fei's soft and weak nature. Only today did they know that they had been wrong. Her actions was both cruel and deft. What they also didn't predict is that Wang Ye actually wasn't angry and seemed to be letting Wang Fei have a free hand in managing the Huoyuan. After he hung left, Qing Ju looked at Yunqing, who had a gloomy expression. She smilingly held Mu Jin's hand and swept the yard before speaking. Ben Wang Fei said before, Ben Wang Fei is a reasonable person and a protector of beautiful women. Today, you didn't respect rank, which is a big mistake, but since beautiful women are rare, I will forgive you today. Finishing, she lazily blinked and looked at the steward mama. In the future, you have to be attentive in your duties at this Kui Yuan. Even though Yunqing Gunyang's allowance is halved, but you cannot slight her. The steward mama replied in agreement, but after Wang Fei's procession left, the steward mama spat at Yunqing and declared loudly, why aren't you carefully serving our honorable Yunqing Gunyang back to her room? She is a goddess that even Wang Fei isn't worthy of her service. Us mere mortals must carefully serve her, in case Wang Ye punishes us. After the declaration, laughter rose in the surroundings. Wang Ye didn't even properly look at Yunqing earlier. What this steward mama said was really gouging at the heart. Chapter 6: The Beautiful Times of Lunch. Coming out of Kui Yuan, Qing Ju raised her hand to touch the biao in her hair and the corners of her lips lifted. She hadn't thought that this Duan Wang was interested in this aspect of a woman. That stare when he had been touched this biao, she didn't dare look directly at it. This Wang Ye was to be pitied, he had to hide even this little fetish. Unaware that her Wang Fei had made Wang Ye into a little cabbage in the ground during winter, Yin Lu said, Wang Fei, newbie doesn't understand. Why move Jian Yun to Zheng Yuan? You dummy, how can you not understand such an easy thing? Mu Jin looked at the surroundings before saying lightly, that Jian Yun is one of Wang Fu's servants and wouldn't have much loyalty towards Yunqing. Today, Wang Fei moved Jian Yun to Zheng Yuan, tomorrow, other people will have the same idea. Water will flow to the lowest grounds, people will walk to the highest grounds. Who knows if there are people beside the other Qishi that want to walk higher? Yin Lu had a brief trance and was surprised at Mu Jin's understanding of Wang Fei's mind. She now understood a little bit at why Wang Fei put Mu Jin at the first position. She looked at Wang Fei and Mu Jin and realized for the first time that Wang Fei was different than in the past. The news that Wang Fei had disciplined that beautiful Huaqi in Kui Yuan had already spread. Qing Ju hadn't reached Zheng Yuan, but on the way there she had encountered a few bowing Yawan, and all of those Yawan were in the service of other Ce Fei or Qishi. Just reaching the entrance to Zheng Yuan, Qing Ju saw Yuzan and Jin Zhan standing at the door. Seeing her return, the two shows expressions of happiness as they moved forward. Wang Fei, Qian Chong Xin came over with others and delivered a lot of good stuff. He said it was what Wang Ye picked especially for you. Xian Chong Xin is still here, do you wish to meet him? Qing Ju nodded and entered the outer room of the Zheng Yuan. She saw Qian Chong Xin and a few Taijian standing respectfully with eyes down. On the table in the room were a few moderately sized boxes and bolts of cloth. There seems to be a lot of stuff. Seeing Wang Fei enter, Qian Chong Xin bowed and said, greetings to Wang Fei. These are what Wang Ye ordered Nikkei to deliver to you. Wang Ye also said, if Wang Fei needs anything else, to just order the servants to do. Thank Wang Ye for me. Qing Ju opened the box on the very top. Inside was a speckled blue-green jade sparrow hairpin. She smiled as she closed the box. Qian Gong had to make a special trip, it must have been such a bother. No bother, no bother. Qian Chong Xin quickly replied to the contrary, and with both hands presented a box with good fortune embossed on the top. This box, Wang Ye said specifically ordered Nikkei to present to Wang Fei in hopes that Wang Fei would like it. Mu Jin received the box and delivered it into Qing Ju's hands. Qing Ju opened the box, her eyebrows raising slightly. She took it out with her hand and the room instantly filled with sighs. It was a Luan Biao, but the craftsmanship was impeccable. A slight movement created the illusion that the bird was alive and in flight. Mu Jin stood the closest and was able to distinguish every line on the Luan. The eye was an inlay of bright agate. Mu Jin was instantly dumbstruck. Such a beautiful Biao, even Qing Ju was shocked into exclaiming. This was a masterpiece. Even in her previous life, she hadn't seen such an intricate piece. This was probably the legendary nobility of the imperial house. Qing Ju smiled widely and looked at Qian Chong Xin, thanks for your labors, Qian Gong, I really like this Biao. Ming He, who had just passed the entrance, saw this smile and thought inside that this smile was blinding. Even Feng Ce Fei and Yunqing Gunyang in comparison would be less vibrant. He couldn't resist looking at Wang Ye, who was walking in front of him, and wonder what Wang Ye thought. Liking it means that it has a use. He walked in front of Qing Ju and took from her hand the Biao, personally replacing the Biao she had originally in her hair with the new one. The roomful of servants all lowered their heads. They couldn't gaze upon the intimacy of Wang Ye and Wang Fei. After Wang Ye spoke in admiration, then did they dared raise their heads. It suits you to perfection. He stepped back and looked at the Biao in the black strands. A satisfied expression appeared. Wang Fei's hair is as black as night and contrasts beautifully against this Biao. An embarrassed smile appeared on Qing Ju's face. She lowered her head to avoid meeting Hang's gaze. She was a vain woman. She liked other people complimenting her. But this person in front of her that complimented her wasn't that simple. She didn't believe that this was purely a compliment. The two hadn't interacted together for long periods before, so after they sat down, they didn't have much to say. Thankfully, the presentation of food disrupted the silence between the two. The protocol was to not speak while eating, so when the two remained silent during eating, there wasn't an awkward atmosphere. Qing Ju looked at Hang's eating and had to admit that this man in front of her had the most beautiful eating motion of all she had seen before. Those motions were much more soothing to the eye than the so-called higher nobility of her previous life. The supposed feast for the eyes was this situation. The state of Hung was enough to arouse the appetite of Qing Ju, who couldn't resist adding another bowl of rice. But in the eyes of others, it became, of course, Wang Fei is definitely in love with Wang Ye. With Wang Ye here, she would even eat more. Hadn't thought that Qing Ju would be so casual in his presence. In front of him, the other women in this fu would take small sips of soup, and quietly eat vegetables. When it came to Wang Fei, he kept on feeling strange with Wang Fei's gaze on him. After the meal was finished, Qing Ju saw the Yawan that knelt in front of her with a copper bowl raised high. She quickly washed her hands and let the other stand to the side. Looked at Qing Ju before taking away his gaze. Now that Wang Fei has recovered, Ben Wang feels much less worried. In the future, you should manage this Haoiwen well. If you don't understand anything, don't worry. Qian Chong Xin and Ming He are the stewards of this fu. Any problems can be given to them. Taking the silk handkerchief that Mu Jin presented to wipe her hands, Qing Ju said, these past days, Qi's body was constantly ill, and couldn't help Wang Ye manage the Haoiwen. Qi is embarrassed to face Wang Ye. Finishing, she looked at Qian Chongxing and Ming He, who were in the corner. These two were very good at managing the big and little things. In the future, Qi wouldn't have much to worry about. Hearing Wang Fei's words, Qian Chongxin and Min He buried their heads deeper to express their humbleness and respect. Even if Wang Ye depended on them, Wang Fei was the true mistress of this Wang Fu. Wang Fei taking charge of Haoiwen was the natural order of things. What was the two of them? Putting the tea for rinsing to one side and wiping clean his mouth, saw Wang Fei, with a smile on her lips, lean back lazily on her chair. The corner of his own mouth rose. When they were in charge, this Haoiwan was a mess. In the future, you will have to spend effort. He lowered his face, looking at the green flowers on the teacup on the table as though he didn't place any importance on the women in the Haoiwan. You are Ben Wang's Zheng Fei, the others cannot compare to you. These words were probably a pretty impressive promise that a man of the imperial house would make to his big wife. Qing Ju looked from the corner of her eye towards He Hung, and at the same time, the other raised his head. Their eyes met and both allowed the smile on their own faces to become even more friendly, as though they were an old couple that had no visible flaws. Qi has no skill but can only make the best effort, to help Wang Ye find a place to relax at home, if nothing else. Qing Ju's smile became blinding. The trust that Wang Ye places in Qi, is Qi's honor. He Hung looked at the bright smile of the woman in front of him and thought about her birth. She was a daughter of Chang de Gongfu, but soon after her birth mother passed away. The fact that the Duke of Changde liked his second wife had already spread through all of the city of Jing. It was rumored that the two had been involved even when the original wife had been pregnant and had been expressing his emotions through borrowing from the poems of Luo Shen. He had actually used the poems of Luo Shen to name his daughters, which had been the subject of much admiration of many wives and girls in the city of Jing. Unfortunately, they all forgot the previous Duchess of Changde and her young daughter. Actually, his own Wang Fei's name came from she wore shoes embroidered with delicate designs. What trailed behind was a garment as light as the mist. He named the daughter born by his deceased wife using a name that represented the depth of love he had with his present wife. The Duke of Changde was either too in love or had no love, but what was certain that this daughter born by his previous wife was to be pitied. Thankfully, she had a reliable maternal family. Otherwise, it wouldn't be certain that she would have grown up. The He Hung which had grown up in the imperial family was very clear about those dark schemes. Wang Fei's personality after the marriage was dull, he hadn't been surprised. But these 2 days, he was very surprised at what Wang Fei had done. Was it that his Wang Fei in the past, living in Changde Gongfu, had suppressed herself in order to survive and was really showing her true self now that she was at Wangfu? Qing Ju wasn't interested in what He Hung thought. She leaned back in the chair with a smile on her face, waiting for He Hung to speak first. This man wasn't simple. She didn't want to speak without preparation and make it difficult for herself. Wang Fei does not have to worry needlessly. You are Ben Wang's Wang Fei, your position is high. If the servants in the Fu do not perform well, then just discharge them. He Hung narrowed his eyes. My Duan Wang Fu will not tolerate servants who disobey. Yes, Qing Ju smiled and turned to more minor topics. The two discussed for another 15 minutes before He Hung stood and said, "You've just recovered, take a noon rest. I'll come back at night." Finding that He Hung had changed what he called himself from Ben Wang to I, Qing Ju understood that this Deng Wang had at least respect for her. She stood as well and walked him towards the door. Seeing him gradually walk far away, she finally let go of the smile on her face. Mu Jin, standing behind her, saw her expression was calm and hesitated before speaking. "Wang Fei, Wang Ye is coming over at night, is there anything to be done?" Qing Ju raised an eyebrow. In this present situation, she wasn't as unreasonable as to not be willing to sleep in the same bed as Wang Ye. She used a handkerchief to wipe at the non-existent sweat on her forehead. "Do what is needed, I'm going to rest. In 2 hours, serve me as I bathe." Seeing Wang Fei's expression was normal, a faint smile appeared on Mu Jin's face. "Newbie will order the others to prepare." Nodding, Qing Ju lowered her head and rubbed an ear. To be with somebody unfamiliar so quickly, there was just the slightest bit of embarrassment. Chapter 7 Qing Ju, he. The news that Wang Ye was coming to Zhengyuan was enough to make the servants cheerful. Everybody started the preparations needed, wanting to renovate the entire yard if possible. Qing Ju actually became one of the calmest in the Haoiwan. Her hair hanging wet and loose, she allowed Jin Zhan to gently dry her hair, Yin Lu to manage her hands, Yuzan her feet and Mu Jin to pick her clothes and accessories. Wang Fei's feet are very beautiful, Yuzhan sighed in admiration. Wang Fei's feet were pale, the toes round and tender to the touch. Half a beat later, she sighed again. The last time Banxia was performing an exotic dance, Wang Ye had praised her feet too. Newbie thinks that she can't compare to Wang Fei at all. What thing is she, that you compare her to Wang Fei? Mu Jin picked a red jade hairpin from a box. Hearing what Yuzhan said, she snorted, she's just a lowly person, she doesn't deserve to be mentioned. Yuzhan finally remembered that Banxia had originally been one of Wang Fei's servants. She had seduced Wang Ye to become a Tongfang and quickly added, Mu Jin Jija, don't be angry. I was just struck by how beautiful Wang Fei's feet were and my mind just didn't work. Hearing the protectiveness of the two Yawan from their words, Qing Ju couldn't resist laughing. From what you have said, if others could hear, they'll think your Wang Fei is a goddess. You can keep hearing it, I can't bear it. Finish and help me up, I can't hear any more. When this came out, all the servant girls laughed and felt relief inside. Evidently Wang Fei hadn't kept what happened with Banxia on her mind. Qing Ju had a preference for wide-sleeved dresses and in the end, still picked a red wide-sleeve dress. The color of fire contrasted with the snowiness of her skin. Casually allowing Mu Jin to style her hair and use the red jade hairpin to secure it, she leaned back against her chair and flipped open a story about a scholar and a beauty. It wasn't that she had much interest in this type of story, it was just there wasn't many amusements in this time. After 2 pages, she couldn't muster the interest to read how the poor men in this time fantasized about rich ladies. Seeing the sky darkening, she let them present dinner. Wang Fei, Wang Ye hasn't arrived. If Wang Ye hadn't eaten when he arrives and you have. Mu Jin opened worriedly, if you are hungry, why don't I let the kitchen send over some porridge? It's already this late, Wang Ye wouldn't come here to eat dinner. Qing Ju waved her hand, just send my orders, that's all. There was nothing exciting about that tasteless porridge. She didn't like waters and soups. When He Hung entered the Zheng Yuan, he saw a stream of Yawan come out with empty meal boxes. Waving away their greetings, He Hung felt a bit complicated, a feeling of disappointment similar to Wang Fei didn't wait for me to eat, my status doesn't seem to be very high. Entering the room, at first glance He Hung saw Wang Fei sitting at the round table washing her hands in preparation of eating. It was that the red of the wide-sleeved dress that was too eye-catching, that he had to pay his attention immediately. He couldn't move his eyes away after a glance. This crimson-clad beautiful woman lazily wiping jade-like hands was his Wang Fei? Wang Ye's arrived. Qing Ju set down the silk she had been wiping with and stood with a smile. Have you eaten? If not, let's eat together. Even though he had eaten, but feeling like he could still eat more, He Hung complied and sat. His gaze landed on the swaying strands beside Qing Ju's face. It was only when Qing Ju personally placed a bowl of pearl chicken soup in front of him that he spoke, why is Wang Fei eating at this time? Qing Ju jerked the corners of her lips, wasn't hungry earlier so this is a bit late. He Hung nodded and felt his heart heal. Even though Wang Fei was explaining it this way, but he still felt that Wang Fei was waiting for him to eat together. Feeling his ego was satisfied, Wang Ye took a drink of the soup, suddenly feeling that he was a bit too thirsty. After the meal, Qing Ju proceeded as normal to wash her hands and drink tea to rinse. She found that the taste of tea today was much stronger than usual. Looking at He Hung who was sitting opposite her, she realized the work of Jin Zan who was crouched in front of her. After the table was clean, He Hung and Qing Ju moved to the more comfortable armchairs and let somebody light the lamps. Other than the wedding night, I had never seen Wang Fei wear a red dress. He Hung smiled as he looked at Qing Ju from head to toe, but this color suits Wang Fei. Qing Ju smiled and saw Mu Jin and the others light the candles in the room. She used one hand to smooth the hair beside her face. They say that women use their appearance to please others, it must be that Qi is trying to please Wang Ye. He Hang's brow moved slightly. Standing and moving in front of Qing Ju, he gently took that lock of hair. Wang Fei has definitely pleased me. Wang Fei has given me a great surprise these past 2 days. Qing Ju raised her chin and smiled widely at He Hung, he. The servants in the surroundings saw the situation. Ming He and Mu Jin exchanged looks and the two waved their hands. Everybody else in the room quickly retreated. Ming He personally shut the door. Seeing Wang Fei's personal Yawan was still standing to one side, he walked a few steps and she followed. He then lowered his voice to say, "Later we'll have to pay attention to see if the Zuzi still have anything they need." This Wang Fei named her useful Yawan using flowers. He remembered the most able of them was Mu Jin. Mu Jin nodded and replied in a low voice, "Ming He Gong Gong, don't worry." Who wasn't important in front of their Zuzi? How to serve, Ming He wasn't the only one that understood. Ming He saw that she wasn't one for words and didn't speak further. Thinking back to how Wang Fei acted today, he wondered, this Wang Fei might not be anything when she doesn't move, but when she moves, it's a shock. Clearly, it was just a simple red dress and dark hair, but why did it have some inexplicable attraction? Rubbing strongly at his chin, Ming He stood quietly in the corner, paying attention to the movement inside the room, afraid that if he didn't catch his master's orders, somebody would steal his present position. Inside the room, He Hung and Qing Ju's struggle had moved to the bed. Both were untidily attired now. One with strong vigor, one with bewitching eyes. There was only the last step. "Wang Fei is so delicious," He Hung exhaled gently by Qing Ju's ear, his voice becoming rougher. The tip of his tongue slid across the fine neck and was well satisfied to find the person below lightly shudder. Qing Ju responded by winding around He Heng's neck with an arm, her foot lightly sliding over the top of He Heng's foot. Wang Ye is a feast for the eyes. Oh God, this man was very skilled at flirting. Ben Wang does want to let Wang Fei know who really is a feast. He Hung, whose appetite had been whetted by Wang Fei to a gaping hunger, pulled away the only covering over Qing Ju's chest. Seeing that slightly moving chest, he felt that fire burning inside had never been as bright. He wanted to bite at this woman's chest, to leave behind on that pale skin a mark that belonged to him. At the moment, it was impossible to know who lit whose fire, but two mouths touched and that fire couldn't be suppressed any longer. It was a wildfire on the prairies, a sea of red waves, whipped higher by the spring winds to a peak. He Hung felt a never-experienced sense of rejuvenation. After the last tremors, he enclosed the soft woman in his embrace and laughed roughly, "Wang Fei is my treasure." Even though it was said you couldn't believe anything a man said after, but this didn't affect Qing Ju's good mood after being satisfied. She allowed this somewhat best quality man to hold her and yawned. Seeing that the woman was drowsy, He Hung raised his voice, "Come, prepare water." Ming He, who had been waiting outside, waved his hand to others who had prepared a bathtub full of hot water to carry it in. He calculated the time. It had almost been 2 hours. He could see that Wang Ye and Wang Fei were full of emotions for each other. Lazily finishing her bath, Qing Ju didn't care to dress and only wrapped a thin layer of silk around before walking to the bed. He Hung looked at that bare jade-like feet, and that snowy legs and arms, and his eyes changed. He bent down to lift the person up and threw onto the bed. Then he covered her with a blanket and growled, "Wang Fei is trying to tempt Ben Wang." Qing Ju laughed and one hand came out of the blanket. She curled her index finger, "This is tempting Wang Ye." Seeing her move like she was motioning for a pet, He Hung couldn't resist. He pulled the blankets down and covered the other with his body again. Outside the door, Ming He heard the sounds inside the room and stopped the servants that had been going in to carry out the bathtub. He couldn't help gazing at the moon. Didn't spring already pass? On the morning of the second day, Wang Ye left the door full of energy. The servants that served Wang Fei were still standing in their original spots. Hearing Wang Ye order the servants not to disturb Wang Fei's rest, Ming He, who was following behind Wang Ye was worthy of his position. Inside the room, Qing Ju slept for another hour before calling for servants. Mu Jin and Yin Lu, who had been waiting with a cotter of little Yawan, silently moved in. Wang Fei, Mu Jin saw the marks that had appeared on Wang Fei's collarbone and moved her eyes away slightly. She quickly helped put on the underrobe and picked a trailing bird and flowers dress for Qing Ju to wear. After Qing Ju washed and sat in front of the mirror, Mu Jin finally spoke, "Wang Fei, today, Wang Ye had a good expression when he left this morning." Qing Ju handed her a pair of tassels she picked and tried to let her face reveal an embarrassed blush. "You are talking nonsense. Go look to see the kitchen has delivered the meal." Mu Jin, seeing Wang Fei was embarrassed, smiled and said, all right. Newbie will go look. Jin Zhan, Yuzan, serve carefully, Yin Lu and I will go. Yuzan was the best hairdresser, so she usually did Wang Fei's hair. Coming of the room, Mu Jin and Yin Lu exchanged happy looks. Now Wang Fei finally managed to establish herself in this Wang Fu. Yin Lu smiled and said, "Next month is the Duke of Changde's birthday. When Wang Fei goes, let's see who dare overstep." Mu Jin, thinking about the unhappy mess of events and people in Changde Gongfu, lost some of the cheerfulness on her face and sighed, as long as Wang Ye will always treat Wang Fei like he did in these last 2 days, nobody in Changde Gongfu will dare not respect Wang Fei. As noble as Changde Gongfu was, could it be as noble as the Wang Fu? Hopefully at that time, Wang Fei wouldn't go back to her dull personally and let the people in the Fu disrespect her. Chapter 8 Changde Gongfu. It was another day for paying respects. The Ce Fei and Shiki arrived early to wait in the outer rooms of the Zheng Yuan. This time, their attitude was much more careful and they were much more courteous to the servants there. Jin Zhan, along with a few little Yawan, came to pour tea for the women before standing silently to one side. Jin Zan Gunyang, we came a bit early today, did we disturb Wang Fei's rest? Feng Ziijin's face was full of apology and looked towards the inner room. Wang Fei must be very busy these past days and exhausted. She had to be busy. Not just managing to gather all of Hao Iwan into her hands, she also had the skill to let Wang Ye remain every night in her rooms. Wang Fei had some smarts. Feng Ce Fei exaggerates, Jin Zan bowed, her brows containing humor. This Fu hasn't been very busy lately and Wang Ye also cares for Wang Fei, so there is no tiredness. Please don't worry, Feng Ce Fei, Wang Fei will arrive shortly. Feng Ziijin didn't expect that her words would be rebutted. She paused slightly before saying, Wang Fei's good health is the greatest fortune for us sisters. Qing Ju had walked to the door when she heard what Pen Ziijin said. She laughed as she entered. Feng Ce Fei's concern, I will remember. The four heard the laughter and simultaneously looked towards the doorway. They saw Qing Ju, wearing a complicated and sweeping embroidered silver luan and red clouds dress, walk in. That long dress trailed on the floor as though it was dragging on their hearts and inexplicably made them feel depressed. The women stood and bowed towards Qing Ju. As they bowed, they saw that red-colored dress stream across their eyes. The beautiful tail of the luan was painful to the eye. No need to be so courteous, sit already. Qing Ju sat down at the front and waved for the others to sit down. She looked at the color of the sky and said with a touch of remorse, Today I woke up a bit late, sorry to let you wait. The others naturally didn't dare accept this apology. They only smiled and said they didn't wait long and then waited for Qing Ju's next words. All of us here are Wang Ye's people. I don't have anything to say. You should all serve Wang Ye to the best of your abilities. Qing Ju's left hand held a teacup, her right hand lifted the lid, not looking at the faces of those sitting below her. Wang Ye has placed the Hao Iwan in my hands. I am not a harsh person, I just cannot stand those who do not follow protocol. If somebody breaks a rule, I don't need to care about any others. I only control the punishment. When the time comes, don't blame me, this Wang Fei, for not showing mercy. You can all do your best. They didn't expect Wang Fei to talk so plainly. Feng Ziijin paused slightly. She felt that these words seemed to be targeted at her but she couldn't say anything. Seeing the other three stand and express they would follow protocol, she also stood and weakly concurred. Since everybody understands, I don't have anything more to say. Setting down the teacup, Qing Ju's expression lightened slightly. I heard Qian Chong Xin say that the Wang Fu received a shipment of fabric previously. Later, somebody will deliver them to your residences. The weather is getting colder, you should make some new clothes from the fabric. Concluding, her hand raised the teacup and motioned towards the outside. Everybody was perceptive enough to see and stood to leave. Coming out of Zheng Yuan, Feng Ziijin snorted, using a few bolts of clothes to pretend to be a good person, it's like dispatching a beggar. Zhang Yongyu had been walking behind her and heard this complaint. Her steps slowed and the distance between them lengthened. After the women left, Qing Ju stood and yawned, service now. She wasn't noble and virtuous. Even though she wouldn't be harsh without reason to other women, she couldn't act the part of virtuous. As to what Duan Wang thought, that was Duan Wang's problem. Shaking her wide sleeves, Qing Ju smiled. This medieval clothing was both finely made and beautiful. After eating the noon meal alone, he hung, as he wiped his hands, spoke, Ben Wang remembers that Chang de Gongfu has sent an invitation a few days earlier. The Duke of Changde's birthday. Ming He took the silk handkerchief from Wang Ye's hands. Yes, a few days before Chang de Gongfu did present an invitation. Other than our Fu, many in Jing also received one. But at the time, Wang Ye had just looked and threw the invitation to one side. Why was he mentioning it now? Ben Wang heard that Wang Fei also received Chang de Gongfu's invitation. He Heng's brows furrowed and his voice carried a hint of displeasure. This Chang de Gongfu is getting worse each successive generation, but their pageantry hasn't seemed to have gotten smaller as well. Ming He knew that this was Wang Ye was now dissatisfied with the Duke of Changde. He lowered his head as he retreated to one side. At the same time, Qian Chong Xin, who had been standing outside the door, walked inside. Wang Ye, a servant from Kui Yuan, came to report that Yunqing Gunyang committed suicide. The person? He Hung asked coldly. Already rescued, but she couldn't breathe properly and fainted into sleep now. Qian Chong Xi swore in his heart, these women from the brothels obviously couldn't be seen in public. Suicide was easy, just wrap around the roof arch in the middle of the night and it was done. She had to pick this time to act like this. He didn't know if she really wanted to die or do something else. If there's nothing wrong, then let her stay there. Tell her if she still wants to die, then go back to her original place to die. Don't dirty my Duan Wang Fu's ground. Seeing Wang Ye push aside the teacup in front of him, Qian Chong Xin instantly understood. Wang Ye was tired of the woman's ritual of first cry, 2 make noise and 3 hang. Yunqing could be considered abandoned, Nikkei remembers. She was just a small actress, but she had to act like a virtuous person and also persisted in competing against Wang Fei. She had forgotten who she really was. She had the heart of a noble woman but the destiny of a Yawan. It was self-inflicted. Since she wanted to die while living in Kui Yuan, get her to move immediately to Chu Yizai. He Hung stood and said in a fed-up manner, that place is peaceful. Ming He saw Qian Chong Xin hurriedly retreat, his brow rose and fell. With such poor schemes, she still wanted to stir Wang Yi's pity. It could be seen that this Huqi didn't live up to her reputation. Inside Zheng Yuan, Qing Ju played with the invitation in her hands. The birthday banquet of the Duke of Changde. Whether she was willing or not, she had to at least go to that fu, even if it was just a formality. But just remembering the rage and dissatisfaction that existed in the original's memories of that place, her face became colder. In this kind of feudal era, there was nothing wrong with the dissolute nature of men in the eyes of society. But to marry somebody else when the body of the deceased person hadn't even cooled and to treat his own daughter as nothing, that meant his character was lacking. A man who couldn't even abide protocol during the 1 year after his wife had died, it was enough to make anybody feel extremely disappointed. Wang Fei, if you don't want to go, just order somebody to send the present. Mu Jin saw that Wang Fei's expression was strange and could only console her, no matter how noble that Chang de Gongfu is, they aren't more noble than you. Qin Wang Fei was nobler and higher ranked than Chang de Gongfu, but the rumors wouldn't sound very good. Also, why would she let go of such a good opportunity? Under the absolute might of the imperial power, even if she was his daughter, the Duke of Changde still had to bow to her. This was a perfect opportunity to return in glory. If she didn't use it, wouldn't she be wasting her status as Duan Wang Fei? That's not necessary. My good father's birthday, this Duan Wang Fei, as his daughter, has to attend. Lips rising upward in a smile, Qing Ju threw the invitation to one side and saw Yin Lu walk in with anger on her face. Mu Jin placed the invitation in its proper place before asking, "Your face is green, who angered you?" "Nobody except that one in Kui Yu Yuan." There was a beautiful play right now. Yin Lu bowed slightly to Qing Ju. Just now, Newbie heard that Kui Yu Yuan's Yunqing tried to commit suicide. In her letter she wrote something like Qi originally was the snow on a high mountain but has now landed in a swamp. She was implying that there were people in this Fu who treated her cruelly. She was blaming Wang Fei for not treating her well. Finished telling the story, Yin Lu had an even harder time controlling the anger in her voice. "Huaqi, she isn't some pure snow on a high mountain. Or does she mean no one is as noble as her? When the snow on a high mountain melts, what is revealed is dirt. She loves to be the snow that is white on the outside and disguises a dirty inside. Who wants to argue otherwise?" Mu Jin snorted coldly and immediately said, "What did Wang Ye say? Take care to not let anybody ruin Wang Fei's reputation." "Mu Jin Jija, you don't have to worry about that." When the news spread earlier, Wang Ye reprimanded that person for needlessly dirtying the ground of Duan Wangfu and ordered her to move to Chu Yizai. Speaking of this, she felt her rage lessen, that Qi Yizai isn't a good place. A beauty will become a wild person. You can see that Wang Ye is really dissatisfied with her. Wang Fei has no need be angry over such a person. Qing Ju finished listening to Yin Liu's speech, laughed, and said, "I'm not angry, but you blew your top." She motioned for Mu Jin to pour a cup of tea for Yin Lu to moisten her throat. That Yunqing was never somebody that deserved any attention. I have no reason to become angry over her. This Yunqing wasn't a smart woman. If she had been perceptive, acted well behaved all the time, she would still have some influence with Duan Wang. But she had to pretend to be virtuous, which was the worst strategy. Perhaps normal customers had liked Yunqing's virtuous and innocent act that fulfilled the desires of the masses, but who was he hung? He was Duan Qinhuang of this entire Dalong dynasty. What kind of women hasn't he seen before? The schemes Yunqing used, they only worked as long as he hung was willing to play along. Send somebody to reply to Chang de Gongfu's invitation. Tell them that on the day of the banquet, I will go personally to congratulate my father. Qing Ju pursed her lips in a smile. She was looking forward a bit now towards the upcoming banquet of the Duke of Changde. There wasn't much entertainment in this era. She had to find something to do in order to not waste the time available. Soon after, the Duchess of Changde personally received the messenger mama of Duan Wangfu and was informed that Duan Wangfei would be coming that day to attend the birthday banquet. After the messenger mama left, the Duchess of Changde, Liang Shi, sneered, commenting, "I've heard before that the Yeta wasn't favored by Wang yet. Today, that messenger mama acted as though Wang Fei was of some importance. I didn't think that a person that dull knew how to pretend." Sitting by her side was Chu Yusu, who sighed and said, "Tai Tai, Jija has already married. Whether or not Wang Ye favors her, she is still Duan Wang Fei." Liang Shi looked at her daughter that was as pretty as flowers and jade and understood the meaning in her daughter's words. She lowered her face and spoke coldly, "No matter what she is, she would not be as important as you in the future." Upon hearing this, Chu Yusu smiled faintly and didn't speak again. Chapter 9 Valued Guests. It had already entered autumn and the weather had gradually become colder. All over Changde Gongfu was an atmosphere of cheer as a variety of carriages parked inside. The gatekeepers had bowed to the point their waists couldn't straighten but kept smiles on their faces to welcome people inside the main gates. At Erman, the Changde Duke's only son and his nephew through his wife enthusiastically welcomed the coming guests. The two were still very young and received compliments of being promising youths. In the recent years, Changde Gongfu had declined further and further, but nothing could beat the fact that they gave birth to a good daughter that married Duan Wang to become a Wang Fei. No matter what they though inside, they still had to do all the formalities. If they didn't act on behalf of the monk, they still had to respect the Buddha. All of them still had to respect Duan Wang. Thankfully, this Changde Gongfu was Duan Wang's in-laws, so the benefits of coming in person and giving presents were higher than the cost. The Duke of Changde's fortunes are as good as the North Sea is deep. The one that spoke was the Marquis of Baorong. He was only a middling character in the city of Jing, but the Duke of Changde didn't dare offend him and came up to greet him. "It's nothing, nothing. Thanks, Marquis, for coming all this way." The Duke took the other's hand as they walked towards the main hall. The other didn't remain courteous, and as they walked, he said, "Today is your birthday, I wonder when will Duan Wang Ye arrive? When the time comes, I will have to rely on the Duke to introduce me to Wang Ye." When the Duke of Changde heard this, he didn't feel so good inside. The message that Duan Wangfu returned said clearly that Wang Fei will come, but as to whether Wang Ye would come or not, that wasn't confirmed. The words of the Marquis of Baorong stirred irritation in the Duke of Changde's heart at his married daughter for not having any skill at conquering Wang Yi's heart and forcing him to feel so awkward. Of course, the Duke smiled as he ushered the other person into the room to disguise his awkwardness. The Marquis of Baorong smiled and said, "Since the Duke is busy, I'll walk myself in, no need to be so courteous." Finishing, he entered the hall. Inside, he really was mocking the Duke. Maybe others didn't know, but he was clear, that daughter that the Chu family married into Duan Wangfu wasn't liked one iota by Wang Ye. It would be a strange thing indeed if Wang Ye did come participate in the Duke of Changde's birthday banquet. Did he think that if his daughter was a Wang Fei, he was a relative of the imperial family? Pa! In the gardens of Niyiwan, Liang Shi was receiving the womenfolk. Seeing that this year was busier than last year, Liang Shi felt conflicted. In past years, these people only sent presents but didn't come personally. Today, they all had the spare time. It was all because that Qing Ju became a Wang Fei. These people were still scorning her for not treating Qing Ju well, as though if they said it, they were much more noble. The way I see it, Furen really is lucky. The eldest daughter is Duan Wang Fei, and this third daughter looks like a flower. The Marquis of Baorong stopped and looked meaningfully at the second daughter of Changde Gongfu that was standing in the corner. Gunyang is also a paragon. This type of good fortune is something we can't even touch. Wang Furen, don't compliment these Yetu anymore. Liang Shi's smile was slightly cold. These wild girls, they can't compare to your Fu's ladies. This entire Jing, who didn't know that the Marquis of Baorong's eldest daughter wanted to marry a poor scholar to the point of death, but now she was coming back to her home every few days to beg for money. Who knew that the Marquis of Baorong seemed to be unaffected by Liang Shi's words and only replied, "No, no." The others indifferently watched the two's fight with tongues. The fact that conflict existed between the Marquis of Baorong and the Duchess of Changde had started in their childhood. Now that they were married, they still allowed others to watch the spectacle they made. A few that had known the two back when they were younger still remembered when Wang Shi had married the Marquis of Baorong. Liang Shi had been angered to the point of not attending any gatherings for girls in the city for the better half of a year. It wasn't until Liang Shi had married the Duke of Changde, whose status wasn't below that of the Marquis of Baorong, that she started to compete with Wang Shi again. Some looked down at Wang Shi's frivolous attitude, but they disliked the way Liang Shi acted even more, so they didn't speak through the entire incident. But this finalized their decision to not take any young girls anymore to Baorong Hofu and Changde Gongfu. At this time, not far away from Changde Gongfu, the entourage of Duan Wang Fei slowly neared. The other officials that came to attend,